Well, one thing that we know in politics is that when world leaders get together, they cause all kinds of traffic jams. I was just talking to Jim Ead about that, and definitely Rick Rosner and a number of other folks as well. So definitely that was going on in California. So we're going to find out more about what was happening. I know that recently, President Xi Jinping of China was meeting with President Biden, and I guess they were trying to figure out some of their common goals and some of the things that they can agree on, and maybe even some of the things that they can agree to disagree on, and all along those lines. So definitely I'll bring up the two folks from the West Coast first, since they have been involved in what's going on in that space. And even Jim Ead said that he had some friends that were going out to a major event that was going there in the, I believe, San Francisco area and all along those lines. And as you were just saying, sometimes that can snarl the traffic. Sometimes protesters can snarl the traffic, because I know that there were protesters in both New York and DC, some that were on the Palestine side, some that were pro-Israel, but definitely that can be going on. I think that even here we had some people that stopped our traffic literally on a major highway a couple of weeks ago because they were doing some protests in support of the Palestinian people and all along those lines. And some folks were going like, I don't have a dog in this fight, and y'all are making me late to work or late to my groceries or late to a number of other things that I might be trying to get to, and all along those lines. But definitely folks sometimes are very passionate about whatever their causes are. So I know that Rick had said that he had been involved in some traffic jams in the past, but tell us about this event that's going on and what might have been causing this traffic jam, because I'm not sure if that was, I think the Xi Jinping meeting with Biden was in DC, but there is I think APAC conference or something like that that's going on in your neck of the woods. So what was causing this traffic jam?
Well, the President Biden and Xi of China were meeting at Filoli, which is the grand old estate. It's right in my backyard, and it's beautiful. It's a absolutely beautiful grounds and a beautiful setting. So I couldn't imagine a more idyllic place for them to meet. But there were road closures around there because of traffic. There were demonstrators, mostly anti-Israel kind of demonstrations, and from what I saw from photos and things like that. So I wasn't there. I didn't see that firsthand. But the idea of the two of them were meeting, they were stressing that they were competitors, but they didn't. The competition did not imply conflict. And so just the return of some sort of communication is always wise in this volatile world of ours. And I was very proud of the president for doing this, proud of the president of China for coming over to establish the decorum. And but one of the things that might be conflict in the future is that Biden was stressing the need for free, open traffic in the Southeast Asian seas. And of course, China has been more not, I don't know how to say this properly, but basically they think they have territorial rights that are in dispute. And so that is a source of tension, but they talked about it, and they did both resolve. And who knows, words are cheap, but they did resolve to keep talking and not let things degrade into where they're in conflict.
No, definitely I hear you, and I'm going to bring in Rick Rosner and some of the other folks as well. But one of the things that I had heard that was very interesting is I don't know that it is good diplomacy to say that you are going to definitely have some things that you want to do in cooperation, but I still think you're a dictator, because that is something that apparently Biden said, and all along those lines. So he was definitely saying that he thinks that he is a dictator, and definitely there might be others that agree with him and all along those lines. But he did say that he was still going to continue the conversation, even though he was thinking of him as a dictator, no doubt, and all along those lines. So I don't know that that's a good starting point, but I'm going to ask our future president, Adam Lambarello, if you would
hold on,
be.
let me say stuff. You brought me in. So I want to talk about war. It's been 78 years since we've had a world war. And war seems inconceivable until it happens. It was 20 years between World War I and World War II, and there was a flu epidemic that wrecked a lot of people's brains. And I'm wondering if we are at risk of moving into war, because COVID it can make you stupider. And if we have a stupid population of the world because we've all had COVID, I wonder if that makes us more belligerent. Now, if we were going to go to world war, we have two possible opponents. Russia and China are the most likely. I don't think China wants war because China can be patient. China will eventually overtake us. They have 4 times our population. They have this, they're an entrepreneurial dictatorship. They can boss their people around, and the people are more or less okay with it because they've rising standard of living. They're pushing all the people, out of the countryside and into the cities to make stuff. And then Russia doesn't want war because Russia's crappy. Russia has half our population. They're bad at stuff. They've got a sucky economy. They couldn't really, the NATO has the European countries who'd be against Russia have the combined population of the U.S. So together, the U.S. and NATO have like 4 times the population of Russia. So there you go. I don't think, we're going to
add something, Rick. I want to add something to it. Even in traditional spheres, such as, for example, chess, where Russia ruled the chess for the last 75, 80 years, if not longer, it deteriorates now to such a mediocrity that they can't win world championship or chess Olympics, or their women suck. Actually, their key ladies left for Switzerland and some other countries. So it sucks. Their chess really sucks. And this is something what never happened before. So you can see how deeply deteriorate Russia, really, what's a big problem there. And never mind the other stuff like ballet, for example, or whatever else they were good at. It's all gone because all the leading ballet dancers, producers, and so on, they're all in the West. All Russian leading stars all immigrated to the West long time ago, like Baryshnikov, like Nureyev, and many others. So what's left there? Mr. Putin. So he's the only one real star who is still there. So you can sort of enjoy Mr. Putin's stardom, but nothing much of that will happen.
I hear what you're saying, and definitely I know Adam's a fan, or at least he has said on this show that he's a fan of Mr. Putin. But I just wanted to know, when you become president, because we've already declared that you're going to be president in 2028 or 2032 and all along those lines, will you be sitting there calling Xi Jinping a dictator, no matter if you think he's a dictator or not? But will you just be out there making those statements that apparently Biden said, even though he was meeting with him? I still think you're a dictator.
Well, I think it's obvious that Joe Biden once again made another silly comment, another stupid comment about the fine president of China, and that's not going to be productive with U.S.-China relations. We have to focus on 2 things with China: better trade relations and Taiwan, the emerging threat that China is posing to Taiwan. And Biden's not going to have productive talks when he's calling him a dictator, although I don't take that much issue with the term dictator, because as we know, Singapore, what a prosperous country that's thrived under a benevolent dictator with free healthcare, free education, and a strong middle class. As far as Russia goes, we have to improve our relations with Russia back to the way it was in the late 1980s. And I'd like to wish Mr. Putin a happy birthday today.
There's a problem, though, that you just said. I mean, I did not know it was his birthday and everything. But there's another problem that you just said, because you said benevolent dictators and that you're a fan of benevolent dictators. There is a belief. I'm not saying that I am a believer of this thought, but there are some people that say that if the beloved Trump, the beloved to some people, was to win a second term, that he may then declare himself king for life and all along those lines. So is this a fear of yours? Because then you might not be able to be president in 2028 or 2032, because he might declare himself king for life, however long that life is.
Well, that might not be a bad thing, but what I'll tell you is this.
What's the opposite of benevolent?
Is ruled by morons. We allow stupid people to vote. I think a benevolent dictator is far more beneficial. Look at Singapore, how prosperous their people are. Free education, free healthcare, free housing, no crime, no drugs. Democracy leads to stupid people electing bad leaders and the wealthy controlling governance because they line the pockets of our elected leaders. Democracy is doomed to fail. A benevolent dictator is the way to go. And once again, happy birthday.
Singapore has 1% of the population of the U.S. It's much easier to rule a teeny little country than it is.
And their education system is far better because, yes, the U.S., K through 12 doesn't even rank in the top 25.
Interesting thoughts. Jacoby, you got anything you want to jump in and say about all this
just want to point out how ridiculous that comment is. The Republican Party has voted against the free health care. The Republican Party has cut the education system. Everything that you have stated, that you have said is so great, and the benevolent leader that you love, those things were voted against by the Republican Party. So you are saying that you hate the Republican Party now? Is that what we're saying? I mean, can we have some agreement? Like you're against the Republican Party because they advocate everything that you are for, and they advocate against everything you are for? Is that what we're talking about?
I do not like the Republican Party. I think the Republican Party has shown no leadership. I also don't like the Democratic Party. And if you want to solve education in this country, here's the first step. Start paying teachers a lot of money because you're going to increase competition. We need great teachers in our public schools. And to do that, you got to pay them a six-figure salary.
I agree with that. When you look at the standardized test scores of teachers, they're the lowest among all the professions, and teachers are great. They're nice. My wife has worked in schools, and school staff are nice because they're not ambitious. If they were ambitious, they'd be doing something that paid better. So they're nice.
I disagree that they're not. I disagree with the
dogs are going crazy.
I disagree with the ambitious part because they're very ambitious. They're doing something that when COVID hit, the nation itself was so have back to school because they couldn't deal with their own children. And who are they sending them to? Teachers. They're very ambitious. They want to help children. They want to actually improve the lives of children. And yes, we need to pay them more, but we also need to give them more support. Just paying them more and then having them pay for their own supplies for their class, not a good thing. Just paying them more and not giving services to the children that need help, that they could actually utilize school counselors, after school activities, all these things that the Republican Party and the libertarians themselves all tend to cut and take away. So if we're going to talk about supporting teachers and improving our education system, money has to be there. So we're in agreement with that, but we also need the support system around there so we can actually help the kids more so than just saying, hey, teachers, take my child because I don't want to be around them because, oh man, this 5 hours a day thing is tiring.
Well, that responsibility lies on parents because parents these days are a disgrace.
Hello. This hand has been waiting for a long time.
Adam, Jim was up next.
Yeah, Jim's up next.
Yeah, thanks. I had a friend who was in my wedding party, actually. He was born in Singapore. And he used to tell me that the best government is a good emperor and the worst government is a bad emperor. And, we have a former president who's judges already convicted him of fraud. And who knows what else he's going to be convicted of in the near future. So we don't want a bad emperor. And the thing that I agree with Adam about is, one of we do need trade, and we do need to agree on trade parameters so that, because I believe in engagement, and this is the way that Nixon went to China with that in mind. And I do believe that, Taiwan is really going to be one of the major potential things that can blow up the relationship. I own Taiwan Semiconductor stocks. I've been promoting it on Sasha's show. It could be taken over and then my stock might be worthless. I don't know. So, this is something that I've been following and tracking. But I think that cooler heads can prevail. I do believe that, people have gotten stupider. People have gotten angrier. Trump is pouring gasoline on that fire. We need to get back to being rational citizens again in this country. I also agree with the criticism of our K through 12 education.
Jim touched on why China wants Taiwan, which is just this island off the coast of China. It's because Taiwan is the world's chip manufacturer, semiconductor manufacturer, with just incredibly high technology. And who owns Taiwan owns that technology. And to get back to education, we need to throw a ton of money at education if we want to compete against places like Taiwan. If we don't want to become an also-ran country like England, great place to live, doesn't own the world anymore. Italy doesn't. All these Spain, all these countries used to own the world, and then no.
Well, we've gone our education system, because yes, it doesn't. It is porous, and we can all agree on that. The problem is we don't produce anymore, and we need trade, but we also need to produce, because we are now a service nation. That is our big thing. We fix things, but we don't produce that. So you can get mad. You can talk about Biden and okay, well, he may be talking to Xi and calling him a dictator and stuff, but he actually did a good thing with the CHIPS Act, trying to bring the chip manufacturing back in-house and actually back to the states. That's huge. And so
go ahead, Joe.
Take it away, Jim. Your turn.
Okay, I was just going to say we shipped jobs in manufacturing overseas for cheaper labor so that corporations could lower their expenses. And, this is coming back to bite us. When the COVID hit, we didn't have the capacity to produce the protective gears for the first responders. And, this was embarrassing for us. And because of the breakdown in the economic distribution system, we couldn't import them. So, we had all sorts of problems. So, getting back to producing is one of the things. I think Biden has done wonderful things about that. And I think that the CHIP Act was spot on, essential. This was a matter of national security to bring that back into the United States.
And not only that, but the CHIPS Act itself, because of what is coming down the pipes in terms of our future, we continue to idea of the combustion engine, or the way we heat our homes and everything else. We continue to have these, and even war in itself. So focusing on chips and the way the AI is coming down the pipe, quantum computing is right around the corner too. All this technological advancement stuff that's happening right now, we need to get on the forefront of it. Energy itself. I mean, we don't really produce solar energy or the solar panels the way we should. I mean, China is taking on that market, the wind turbines themselves. I mean, there's just so many things that we get stuck in our mind in the old ways of thinking, when we should be thinking about what's next, what's 10 years down the road. And so I applaud Biden with that CHIPS Act and some of the other things that he's trying to focus on in terms of, we have to think about the future.
Hey, Jacoby,
we're in the middle of the end of the world. Not that we're all going to die, though. I mean, eventually we will. But humans have lived the same way for thousands of years. In cities, and we raise kids as families, and now AI is going to upset everything. A guy I know who's in the middle of all these technologies, who knows what he's doing, he's like a mini Bill Gates, says we will have 1 trillion AIs in the world by the end of this century. They won't all be conscious, but a lot of them will be, and we'll be in relationships with them, and all human affairs will be weirdly disturbed.
Just out of curiosity, will any of these AI be part of the drag community? Because the other thing that I was going to bring up on our politics show is apparently the Supreme Court says that Florida can't enforce the anti-drag laws, and we do know that was a linchpin of some of the things that DeSantis was trying to do as well. And surprisingly, there were some justices that have been seen as being maybe a little bit on the conservative side that actually came out on the side that of the way that the court went. So some people may be surprised that Justice Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh were some of those that came out in that decision and all along those lines, because they were wondering about some of the First Amendment complexities of the case. And like I said, if Nick was here, he might be able to talk about some of those complexities. But some of the more staunch conservatives like Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch said that they would have allowed the law to take effect. But there were some others that might have surprised people with their decision, the way that they went.
I can speak upon that and say that law violates the First Amendment, and any credible originalist, thank God for Justice Scalia, would recognize that the law should be found unconstitutional. Now, with regard to education, I'll just make 2 points. Number one, we need to start paying teachers six-figure salaries across the country. That's going to increase competition and the quality of teachers. And number two, we have to decrease disparity in educational quality, because the U.S. Supreme Court in San Antonio School District versus Rodriguez held that basically funding for public schools can be based on property taxes. That's created educational inequality, particularly between whites and blacks, and that's intolerable in any society that's dedicated to equality. As far as corporations go, you want to stop them from outsourcing? Reduce the corporate tax like Donald Trump did. And I look forward to that happening in 2024.
Just to point out what you're talking about in terms of the scholastic stuff, that is the institutionalized racism that is out there, and people will not acknowledge it and keep fighting against it. But yes, I'm glad you point that out, because that is one of the big fights that people keep going on. In terms of lowering the corporate tax rate, if you look at our golden years, the golden years that everybody keeps talking about returning to and how the middle class was built, well, the tax rate was a lot higher. And then even when Reagan dropped that tax rate down, what ended up happening? Because the country was losing so much and we were going even further in debt because of what Reagan decided to do, guess what happened? He jumped that tax rate back up because he found out that the idea of trickle-down economics, which the whole basis of, hey, we've got to drop the lower tax rate, that's what that's based on. Trickle-down economics, or supply-side economics, whatever you want to call it, does not work. It has failed in every way. There is nowhere in our history where trickle-down supply-side economics has worked. Nowhere.
Taxes are at a 60-year low. And we need a push like the one we had 60 years ago when Sputnik freaked everybody out. The push for education. The Republicans have to quit being against public education, for one thing. And we had a push 60 years ago that led to our indisputable tech superiority for the past 60 years. And one more thing is, we need, as the world changes faster and faster, we need sane politics. Politics can never keep up with the speed of technology, but at least it has to be, you need a bunch of sane, educated people holding national level elected office.
I couldn't agree more. The pace of change is not only accelerating, but it's going like this. It looks more like a hockey stick than anything else. And the pace of change is not being kept up with by the elderly congressional members, elderly president and presidential candidates. And are they listening to people who actually know what's coming down the pipe? And hopefully some people do listen, and we can pretty much tell who those people are. And there's some people that don't listen to anybody and think they know everything.
That's because
we don't want them to be president. My goodness gracious, no.
Well, I mean, and James, I look forward to your vote in 2028. But I will tell you, I'm going to win California. But the reason is because democracy doesn't work. It leads to very wealthy people lining the pockets of politicians who are beholden to them. It impedes change, and it also causes stupid people to vote, who then in turn elect stupid leaders. And what winds up happening is a concentration of wealth and really a corrupt electoral and political process.
I got that. When you're done, Adam, I don't think that you're right in that democracy doesn't work. Unregulated free market capitalism doesn't work. And that's been proven over time. Teddy Roosevelt, over a century ago, ran about busting the trust.
But do we have unregulated capitalism?
Madam, my turn. unregulated free market capitalism inevitably led to monopolies. And that's the suppression of competition, which I think we're all against, the suppression of competition.
I mean,
And
part
I
of that
think
is
what we have to say is that Plato hated democracy, but it was mob rule that he wrote about. And what we have now is representative democracy. And that's very different. And so what we have to do is worry about getting representatives of us that can be up to the challenge. And right now we're failing at that. It comes down to the voters. You're right. And I don't agree that they're all morons. I'm sorry about that.
No problem. Just really quickly while you're taking care of that, and this is for everybody. Within several industries, including media, including even the entertainment industry, there has been a number of monopolies that have existed and have taken control. A lot of people will say that radio is controlled by 3 or 4 major entities. There are some that would argue that mainstream television, that is the case as well. And there are a number of other industries, including some in Hollywood, where Rick is based at it as well, that are very much monopoly oriented and everything. So I'm just wondering, will we ever see the true breaking up of monopolies, and should we see a true breaking up of monopolies? Because there are a number of fields. I remember, as you just mentioned, I think, Rick, the breakup, or maybe it was Jim, of the baby bells and all along those lines, that was a major movement and everything. But should we see like the breakup of, say, Radio 1 and Clear Channel, which pretty much own the entertainment industry right now?
So in entertainment, you're seeing the failure of attempted monopolies. The streaming services like Netflix tried to capture the streaming market by spending billions of bucks on productions, and then everybody else started streaming, and Netflix did not succeed. So monopolies don't always succeed, but there's always the potential for that. Like with Google, are they gonna? I don't know. And Facebook, like Facebook looked pretty monopolistic, and then it became your grandma's social medium. So, and has lost a little juice.
That's an interesting point. And like I said, I know some people that talk about that stiff competition and everything. I was also wondering, because since we're talking about social media, I belong to a couple of Facebook groups, and I can't say that I know the stance of all of those groups or the stances of all of the groups that I belong to in LinkedIn or a number of other things. But there have been some folks that have gotten on Rashida Tlaib, because apparently she is a member of a Facebook group that is very pro-Hamas and all along those lines. Now, whether she just joined the group because she saw Palestine in the name, or whether she was actually active in that group, that's the question that I don't know the answer to, and I don't know the woman personally. So if I had a chance to ask her, I'd be wanting to know, are you actually active in this group, or did you just join it because it sounded cool and all along those lines? I mean, I just learned recently as I was looking her up that she's and I'm just going to say a dig at astrology and everything, but apparently she's a Leo, and I don't have a real good respect for Leos because they seem to be very much they like to be the on the top of the pedestal. They like to put themselves on a pedestal. I'll just leave it at that. Well, it's from my own personal experience and everything. But what is y'all's thoughts around this notion? Do we even know whether Mr. Trump, who I know Adam has said some good things about, does he belong to a MAGA Facebook group? I don't know. Maybe Adam knows and everything. And would we care one way or the other?
Well, as far as Rashida Tlaib goes, she certainly has my sympathies. I do hope that she gets the psychiatric assistance that she needs, and we're all praying for her. But when it comes to monopolies, we do have a robust antitrust jurisprudence, and the remedy to monopolies is competition. But sometimes you have to question the fundamental assumption. Maybe monopolies would be a good thing. Maybe it would be better if we had less choice. Humans are happier when they have less choices and more structure and less freedom. That is an empirical fact. And what democracy...
We need studies about that.
James talks about how democracy is...
Statement.
James
hold on a second, but Adam, to what you just said, I'm going to give you an example really quickly. Clear Channel, if you study Clear Channel, then you will see that a lot of times that they own the venue. They own the... in some cases, the venue, I think that's the one I'm thinking about. But there are a number of these monopolies that might own the venue, the artist, as well as the means of getting the information out, whether that's radio or television or along those lines. So if a monopoly is that kind of multi-layered monopoly, is that good for the everyday citizens? Because a lot of times people, including some on our network, have complained about the high cost of a Taylor Swift or a Beyonce ticket. If you own the artist, if you own the venue, and you own how we get it out to the citizens and everything, yeah, I would set the price at something crazy and along those lines because I own all of the aspect of what is going on, and that is what a lot of people are complaining about within the radio space.
But the business model of monopolistic, disruptive companies like Uber, like Google, like is to make things great at first, spend more money than you can afford to capture the market, and then engage in shitification, which is Cory Doctorow's term for capturing the market, you spending more money than is sustainable, and then making things crappy for people. Amazon, captured the market, and now they engage in all sorts of monopoly practices that make it worse and worse for both sellers and buyers.
Well, I'm going to pick on Jatovy right now because one of the monopolies that exists, at least to some degree, and I like some of the people that work there, and I've made some of the management, not necessarily the way that Jatovy knows it, but some people would argue that, say, the Durham Bulls are a monopoly that is the kind of description that I was given about, say, a DPAC that might be owned by Clear Channel or some of the other ones that own multiple venues. Because if I remember correctly, the Bulls are owned by a network that they're owned by folks that also own the network that airs what the Bulls are doing, and in some cases, for all I know, they might own some of the players and all along those lines. So any thoughts around this notion of monopolies and how they might be a negative thing?
Well, I'll go after Jim because he had his hand up longer.
Thank you, Jatovy.
Yeah,
But
right,
you go ahead, answer that question, and then I'll take it back.
No, take it away because
Okay, well, I want to
say
get
the
back
same
to-
thing I'm going to say because I don't really have any.
I'm not going to answer
Mark
that
is trying to
question,
get me in
Mark.
trouble.
I'm going to say back in world politics that Russia is a second-rate power now. And so I think that the discussions with China are foremost important, and that this is really a potentially inspiring start to a more productive relation between the two of the superpowers in the world now. And if they don't fight, and if they just compete, the world will be a happier, safer place. And the talk about monopolies and that sort of stuff, and that people are happy with less freedom. I go back to one of my favorite books of all time. It was recommended to me by Grandmaster Robert Hubner from Germany, The Master and the Margarita. Sasha, I think you may be familiar with Bulgakov, and it was written during the Stalin era, and you couldn't write what you wanted to write during the Stalin era. And so he wrote a parody of, and he got it published because they didn't know he was making fun of them. Yeah. So that was the only way for self-expression to be done in those days. So those are
fair, just to make a clarification before other people get to their conversations. I said Clear Channel. I was actually thinking Live Nation because Live Nation is the multinational company that owns, like I said, a lot of the performers. They also own Ticketmaster. So if you go get a ticket, you're also getting it from Live Nation as well. So like I said, I definitely made some misrepresentation as the Clear Channel, but even though Clear Channel has some similar issues, but Live Nation is the bigger one that is known to own a lot of the performers as well as a lot of the venues and a lot of the other aspects, including the ticketing.
I have a question. These tickets now for all those concerts, they cost $400-500 a month. So if you every month you're attending at least one concert, for this money you can lease one of the latest Mercedes models and drive fantastic car for the same money what you're spending on garbage that you can see on YouTube or elsewhere. So it beats me. I just don't understand that. And Adam, I would like to add something to what you were saying before.
Mm-hmm.
You remember the cradle of civilization and democracy is the great city of Athens, Greece, 2,500 years ago. It wasn't democracy for everybody. It was democracy only for people who could understand and use it and manage it, and all the rest of them, there were slaves, there were some people from other countries or so on, they were not granted the same rights as the free people of Athens. So in democracy for everyone, I'm 100% against it because people don't know
50 years ago,
Thank you.
50 years ago, conservative think tanks figured out that dumb people are easier to mobilize than other people.
And manipulate.
The modern Republican Party is the result of generations of going after dumb people and getting them politically active.
Well, you talk
just
about
to touch on that real quick, what the Republican Party did, because this was all based around the whole civil rights era, and when the upset Dixiecrats and the upset many upset Caucasian individuals were mad about the whole Civil Rights Act and left the Democrat Party. And then what the Republican Party figured at that time was they could play on that and create a voter bloc. And then Nixon came out with what's called the Southern Strategy. And that has been their strategy ever since. So they play on that anger, that angst, and that white rage. And that's what led Trump really into office. And that's what he's playing on now. To get back to the monopoly situation, the monopolies are bad. I wouldn't call the Bulls or any baseball team a monopoly because that doesn't make any sense. I mean, baseball, there's so many leagues that are out there. It's not a monopoly. You just have one that's working for one business, another that's working for another. So what I would point out as a prime example, well, no, the gaming community you guys would miss out on, because right now there's only really one football game that's out there. That's Madden Football. That is actually a monopoly. Electronic Arts took on other companies, bought the rights to the NFL. And so no other company can buy into the NFL product. Therefore, there's only one product. And this is where the problem of monopolies comes into play. The reason Madden Football hasn't improved is because there's no competition for Madden. So monopolies take away the extra competition. If we're about, hey, freedom and competition and improving our society, that's where monopolies fail everybody. And monopolies are porous for that. On top of that, if we're talking about freedom, you cannot have freedom when you only can buy from one place. That is monopolies are antithetical to actually freedom. So which one do you want? Do you want choice? Do you want selection? Do you want the idea that you can do whatever you want? Or do you want to be told? Then you want to be ruled. That's not democracy. Yeah. And that's not even a dictatorship. That's having a king and a servant. So therefore, monopolies lead to such bad things. And then the idea of having a dictator, democracy is where it's at. Democracy is what gives people the choice and the idea that, hey, I want to vote for Jim as president. I'm not forced to say, Adam, you have to be my ruler. No,
you should
having be. Choice is what people want. And the idea that democracy, and then the whole notion, getting back to what Sasha talked about. Sasha talked about, hey, for example, the rights of many and the rights of, okay, based on the logic of having a ruler, that means you're actually advocating that slavery should have been, slavery is one of those things that should always have been there because, hey, what did those black people really need? They didn't need any choice. We should subjugate them and treat them the way, no, that's not the way life is supposed to be. I should have the same freedoms and choices that others should. And so
there were many white slaves in the history.
It was actually Rick next.
There's no
problem. So it was,
let's settle down. Let's let Rick talk.
So Adam's right that too much choice in too many areas can be overwhelming when you compare our lives of insane choice to like our parents' lives in the 60s and 70s. But that's where AI concierges are going to come in. We're all going to have little Jiminy Crickets in our devices who are going to help us negotiate the increasingly complicated world. And then we're going to have to worry about whether our Jiminy Crickets are honest brokers or are filling us with BS.
Rick makes a really good point, and Adam, I'll pass it to you next, is that, the technology, the acceleration of the technological changes in our lives has given us so much choice and so many distractions that we have lost the ability to focus and concentrate. And this is something that, I always advocate teaching chess in the schools because it teaches you to sit still and think. And, one of those things that we don't do anymore is sit still and think about what other people are saying. We don't listen mindfully. And these are problems that are happening in our society today, and they're very difficult problems to solve. And I don't know if Jiminy Cricket is the answer, but I think it's very true to bring the topic up. And thanks for doing that, Rick. Adam?
Sure.
Well, I think, and I'll be brief, just 3 brief points. And this panel talks a lot about democracy and freedom, but they talk about it in a theoretical way. When you look at how it really works, democracy in this country is a show. Democracy is run by the wealthy. The politicians are lined, their pockets are lined by the wealthy. Example, the NRA. It's not really a democracy, representative or otherwise. Now, we talk about freedom and we talk about the First Amendment. I think our First Amendment should be changed substantially. The First Amendment has been interpreted to allow wealthy people to line the pockets of politicians. It's allowed people to utter racist, sexist, homophobic garbage at other people that causes emotional trauma and that is violence in and of itself. I don't see freedom of the First Amendment that way. And we talk about monopolies. Rick is right. Less choice is better. When I go into the supermarket, I don't want to have to choose between 50 different types of fish oil. I just want one. I want the government to enact price controls so we prevent that from happening. I don't want to go, when I get a plane ticket, I don't want to have 15 different choices of what airline. I want to have one. And less freedom and less choice leads to greater happiness, and a little bit less democracy and a little more structure, i.e. ruling, is going to be happy. Look at Singapore. That's a perfect example. And once again, I'm appalled that this panel has not joined me in wishing Mr. Putin
Adam,
I also
let me jump in.
wait, hold on.
Hold on a second.
I agree with you.
I had my hand up first.
let me respond to you. In Soviet Union, there was only one airline. It was Aeroflot.
Good.
If you want to fly from A to B, it was only Aeroflot. From C to F, Aeroflot. From H to K, Aeroflot. There was simply no other choice. And by the way, about competition, I just want to offer you a very interesting example. Many of you probably saw a movie, Demolition Man. That's a movie about 30 years ago. There was Sylvester Stallone played in that movie, a few other stars. So the thing is in the future, and so people walk on, and now we are going for dinner. He said, "Where are we going for dinner?" He said, "Taco Bell." Okay, they're going to Taco Bell. It's 5 stars restaurant. The pianist is playing. It's just really something. And he said, "How come Taco Bell? How come it's Taco Bell?" Well, a few years ago there was a restaurant war, and Taco Bell became a winner. All restaurants being called Taco Bell. Okay, 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars. It's all Taco Bell now.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of less choice. I'm in
Hold on,
favor
it's Jim's
of
turn.
being
It's
able to
Jim's turn.
navigate choice.
Jim, it's on you, and then
Jim,
it's
and
Toby.
Okay. I think navigating choice is the right thing, Rick. But I wanted to say, we can talk about the representative democracy that we were founded as a country on, and we can say that we're failing it now because it's been corrupted. But it doesn't mean we don't have it. What we need to do is fight to take it back. And that's what we're not seeing, I think, across the country as citizens, that we need to really start to take control of our government again and vote for people that will be responsive to our needs rather than to the needs of the corporations and not rather to the needs of the wealthy. And this is the kind of thing that the founders really believed in an educated citizenry. But that at that stage, they said it was white males, landowning white males. So we have got this complicated system, and it's complicated because we don't want just white landowning males to vote anymore. So, we've excluded the vote, and you can say, yeah, now we include a certain segment of the population that's stupid. Tough. We got to include the stupid people too, because that's the nature of it. But you have to have charismatic, persuasive leaders who are also good quality human beings. And once we start to choose them according to their character, rather than their false machismo or something like that, we're going to continue to struggle. But really getting the money out of the politics will solve the problem of representative democracy. And this is what we should be fighting for, not to abolish democracy or not to think that democracy.
Well, that's like telling
Just-
someone.
hold on, real quick, Adam. Yeah. So just to touch on a few points, because Adam tried to bring up a few, and honestly, Jim is spot on again. Yes, we need to get money out of politics, and we need to figure a way to do that. But I got to push back again because everybody keeps saying, we don't need so much choice. No, we need all the choice in the world, because having that freedom of choice allows us to do sciences that we would never think about trying, do art and entertainment that we would never even attempt to try, doing things that could help our society that we couldn't even consider 5 years ago. So having the amount of choice is fine. Choice, it doesn't matter about how many apps you have on your phone, but that's why these places create things to help. Because you know what? When you have all this choice, yeah, you're right, it does become overwhelming. But you know what somebody thought about? Hey, let me create a job, a business around being able to navigate and help people learn different ways. That's about having choice and having opportunity. So having the amount of choice isn't the issue. The issue is us getting back to, you want to talk about education. This is something to think about in education. Having that big giant cloud of ideas, we shouldn't be whacking away these things. The only thing that we should make sure that everybody abides by are the laws. And when you want to talk about the First Amendment, for example, yes, the First Amendment allows you to say things that we don't agree with, but that is the First Amendment. That doesn't mean that it is freedom of consequence. So therefore, you learn from those consequences about the freedoms that you can't yell bomb on a plane. It's not illegal to do so. But the thing is, you learn that it creates a problem and creates a havoc. Therefore, you go to jail for the reasons that you just did. So you have a consequence for what you've done. All the racist and things that you yell about, yes, there's a consequence for that. It may not be legal. It may be legal, but there's a consequence. So you have the freedom to do particular things, but that doesn't mean you have the freedom of consequence. That is that navigation that we all want, but you take away those freedoms, and then you don't have the ability to create StreamYard that we're on, because somebody only follows a path to, hey, let me make a phone call because we're going to have a conference call. And how do we get that conference call out? So yeah, freedom is what we all advocate for.
I'll let Adam speak, and then I'll speak.
I'll be short, James. Once again, the panel is discussing democracy in very theoretical terms that don't reflect reality. We're not going to get money out of politics. The Supreme Court and Citizens United and McCutcheon versus FEC in 2 5-4 decisions made that clear. When it comes to the First Amendment, I'll ask you guys, when it comes to democracy, do you think someone who's a member of the KKK should vote? My answer is no. The way democracy is today, James's argument is essentially like telling someone to stay in a bad marriage even though their husband's cheating on them repeatedly. It's not going to work, and the Supreme Court has made that clear. And like I said, the First Amendment, we shouldn't be allowing people to spew racist hatred, and we shouldn't be allowing members of the KKK to vote. And when it comes to choices, look at what choices are doing to people on social media. Look at how it's destroying our young people, their self-esteem. Structure is better than choice. A little less freedom creates a lot more happiness. And I don't believe that choice is the way. I think that less choice and a little bit less freedom, particularly when it comes to the First Amendment and to monopolies, is going to lead to greater overall prosperity for all Americans.
Yeah, Adam's never had the benefit of talking to Grandmaster Boris Gogol that I did. I hosted him in San Francisco for a tournament, got to know him very well. And he was one of the people that went on hunger strikes in order to get out of the Soviet Union. And he told me that he didn't know it was so bad until he traveled. He was allowed to travel because he was such a strong player. And he went to Argentina and he saw how other people lived. And all of a sudden, he wanted to get out. He was desperate to get out. And so I think if you talk to people that have escaped fascist regimes, you get a different feel for what it's like to live in one. And so, no, I don't think the answer to democracy is less freedom. I will never give in on that argument. And yeah, Citizens United was the worst decision since Dred Scott. It was absolutely appalling when they passed it, to me personally, and the consequences have been dire indeed. It's a very dumb decision, but look what they did to Roe v. Wade. 50 years of precedent down the drain. So it's not that we're saddled with this forever. We just have to keep fighting. And this is what I keep going back to. It's a citizen's responsibility to fight for what's right. And we can disagree about this, but we can also have civil discussions about it and move forward. And I think right will win out in the end. We keep making progress. But the idea of social media, this is not something I grew up with. It's not something that my parents could help me with. It's not something I can help my nieces and nephews with. It's something that they're finding out for the first time. And it's a wild, wild west out there. And so we do have to put some structure in it, some protective measures in it. We do have to have some structures agreed upon, but too much structure is so oppressive that it's no longer human life. It's some other kind of life. It's something like slavery, which is dehumanizing. So, you don't want to dehumanize people. You want to offer them freedom, but enough structure so that we don't go around walking on people's lawns. Get off my lawn. Rick?
So let's talk about presidential choice between the two probable major party candidates and then the little candidates like RFK Jr. and Jill Stein. Really only one of them, Biden, stands for just normal run-of-the-mill government, which is what I want. But Biden looks like he's in trouble according to polls. But I would argue that polls, that sane people less and less respond to polls, that polls are increasingly polling crazy assholes. So you can't really tell what's going on out there.
And I just wanted, I completely agree with the polls. Polls are always skewed. But also to get back to the voting, I don't think Adam has had the, I guess, as Jim put it, the pleasure of having the Grand Wizard hating him.
Well, I wouldn't insult the regime.
Just a point. The Grand Wizard of the Klan. Now, you just said that you don't want the KKK voting.
Right.
And I despise white supremacists as much as anyone, maybe more so than many. But I'm not going to take their right away to vote. Because who's to say that same individual that got into office, who the giant orange tyrant, who you said would be okay to be in there, the same dude who retweeted a gentleman in a golf cart yelling out white power, who's to say that that same orange tyrant won't say that black people shouldn't vote? That's what happened in years past. That is what we're talking about. History repeating.
They're trying to do it now. Yeah.
And that's what's going on. Yeah, because they're trying. If you look at what the whole CRT issue, we're going to ban CRT. Well, it's not even taught in school, but we're going to ban it anyway. Well, you know what it's trying to actually teach and what people are trying to talk about? Well, it doesn't matter. We're going to say slavery was a choice and that the slaves learned. No, all that's factually wrong. And all that is offensive to say. But those same individuals are the ones that are pushing to have this same dude take away my right to vote. Because look at what they're doing in North Carolina, how they're merging black communities. In Alabama, that got overturned by the Supreme Court, even though they're still trying to do it. So they're trying to take away the black vote. Well, so therefore, when you say, we need to take away KKK people from voting, no, we don't. What we need is everybody to have the option and the ability to vote.
Rick's got his hand up, Adam, then you.
All right, it's become increasingly ineffective to shame people for being dumb or being in the KKK. When
really
50 years ago, your neighbors, you'd be worried about your neighbors thinking you're a horrible person. Now with social media, you find your friends online and you amplify each other in your horrible beliefs, and it lets people be louder in their horrible beliefs and in their dumbness that they think is smartness.
Well, I want to mention something that I strongly disagree that any person should be allowed to vote, because there are just too many unstable people, complete idiots uneducated people. They don't know nothing about the government, how it works, and everything. Why people should be allowed to vote? You might as well get animals to vote, just dogs.
But who's going to be in charge of that when you put white people in the South in charge?
The immigrants. Okay, I'll tell you this. Immigrants, when they're coming to the United States, and in order to become citizens 3-5 years later, they have to pass exam. They have to know a little bit of a history of the United States, how works government, what's a federal government, what's a provincial government. So they have to pass the test that could qualify them to be responsible citizens, that they know the system, how it works, or so on. So then they can make an educated choice. Now, if you take anybody from the street and tell him, he may know nothing about how government works or so on. So why would I allow him to have the same voice as somebody like Adam, for example?
Just to point out, as we just talked about history repeating itself, your exact comment was the same thing, that reason why they didn't want slaves to vote, because they couldn't read. So you're talking about history repeating itself, and you're blocking out a block of people that you believe is uneducated.
No,
That you feel is smart enough. So that is an old slave thing that is now you're advocating.
They have a chance to go in front of the judge, pass the exam, and then
you didn't listen to a word I just said. That is an old slave thing where they said black people cannot read.
I'm not talking about black people, period.
Therefore, they should not be allowed.
I never said anything concerning black people.
Now he's saying that's the same argument.
It's the same argument, Sasha.
No, it's not the same argument.
It is. You're saying
citizens have the right to vote. I don't care if you're a stupid citizen. I don't care if you're you can't read or write citizen. If you're a citizen, you have rights. That's what the United States stands for.
It's not the same argument because it's for a completely different purpose.
Incorrect.
I do not believe in the right to vote. I do not believe that
you don't believe in the right to vote.
No, the people in the KKK don't have a right to vote, okay? People who say that Holocaust never happened don't have a right to vote. The weed-smoking high school jock from somewhere, nowhere, Montana doesn't have a right to vote.
Hold on, Adam. What is your basis?
You say you want good leaders and good democracy? Start by restricting the right to vote to those morons.
What is your basis?
How would this happen, that we would pass legislation that would put guardrails on who votes? I can't see it ever happening.
Well, that's going to be the job of all of us, isn't it? I thought citizens were supposed to be responsible for democracy.
Based on history, Adam, because as you said, as you started, same thing with Sasha, you don't want dumb people to vote. Literacy, or being able to read, was considered, if you could read, you were educated. If you could not, you were uneducated. So you are not wanting uneducated people to vote, which is the same argument they used to block voting for slaves. That is the same exact argument, no matter how you want to spin it. I don't want the KKK.
Don't complain when Trump is elected.
The history of IQ testing
gives rise to idiot leaders like Trump.
It was the IQ strategy.
White land owning males. Rick?
The history of IQ testing is chock full of racism and racism.
It has nothing to do with
the
race.
First tests that came out 100 years ago during World War I were crazily biased against people, the darker people from Southern Europe, let alone, black people, because they were designed by white people from Northern European countries. Some of them were overtly racist. Some of them weren't even aware of their racism.
And just to touch on, and just to add on, because I know, Adam, you want to jump on, this isn't about race. Well, Adam, you just pointed out the institutionalized racism that's within our society. So therefore, if you're already going to say we don't want dumb people, if you're saying that the underperforming schools are in the black community, you know who's going to be the first not to be able to vote?
No, because that's not who I'm restricting. I'm restricting the racists. You want to eradicate institutionalized racism?
You said
starts
uneducated.
by saying the KKK members can't vote.
So you going to say, are you going to say the KKK is going to come out and say, hey, I'm a Klans member. You know what? I want a voting card.
They're more KKK people than Adam.
The people who hold signs that say God hates fags and thank God for 9/11, they can't vote. You want a more virtuous society? You should allow people who have the moral character
Incorrect.
to deserve
If
to
you
vote.
want a more
When I say
virtuous
it's not about racism, I'm
society,
talking about eradicating racism, not promoting it.
if you want a more virtuous
Yeah,
society,
you're talking about the
which-
wrong way to get there.
yeah, if you're
Really?
talking
Well, what's your way?
My way
the
is to
status
keep
quo?
educating
Adam.
people.
Because that gave us Trump.
Adam, hold on, Adam. You said you wanted a
Corrected
more
that.
virtuous society. And then you're arguing that, hey, we need an arbiter to decide who can and who can't vote. Now, if you're placing an arbiter in that position, if you take a look right now, the majority of the actual US is Caucasian. We already understand within our society there is institutionalized and systemic racism. And when we come together in groups of individuals, usually what happens if we're in a melting pot, usually the white group gets together, the black group gets together. Our most divided hour of the nation is every day on Sunday when we go to church, because you have the black churches, you have the white churches, you have the Asian churches, and so on and so forth. So when you're talking about an arbiter being in this position to decide on who's racist and who's not, and if that person has any inclination like a Marjorie Taylor Greene, you know who's not going to vote?
Right.
Black vote.
Sasha,
And you know who,
Sasha's up, and then Rick.
All I say before I leave, with rights, Jim, you're right about rights. So you're saying that there are rights and you cannot revoke the rights. But I want to tell you that with the rights come responsibilities.
Great.
And if you want to have only rights and no responsibility, I strongly disagree with
I
this.
agree with you.
Absolutely 100%. Okay,
Right,
guys,
the way
thank
to-
you for the discussion.
Thank
the
you,
way
Sasha.
to get fewer racists and idiots to vote is to make fewer racists and idiots. And the way you do that is with effective messaging. The Republicans have outstripped the
Education.
Democrats in messaging for decades now. The Democrats need to get punchier, more aggressive in convincing people to not be racist schmucks.
the funny thing is what
That's
you're talking about
idealistic.
again,
Nice.
all that is built in within all that is built in, because if you look at who owns these individual places, it's a top-down thing. The media is pushing out a particular narrative. For years, cops used to only show the show Cops used to only show black people getting arrested. You know what that did? That taught a lot of people that black people were bad. There are many areas within the country that don't have a black person even close. Their books, the Green Book itself was based on a real thing because you couldn't go to these sundown towns. So these things are built within our society that we need to fight. And sitting there, it's a matter of, we cannot look at ways to take things away from people. What we need to focus on are to educate and actually increase the opportunity for people to vote, because those people who are trying to become empathetic and trying to understand and reach out, say there's a person in West Virginia way in the hills who's never seen a black person in their life, only on TV. But as soon as they're exposed and as soon as they get the education behind it, they find out that civil rights was a great thing, and they don't need to listen to that backwoods individual who's raising that rebel rebel flag, saying, "Hey, those black people are nothing but bad." It's about understanding, empathy, education, and exposure, representation. All these
You
things
guys are
matter.
living in
I got one last thing, and then I gotta go.
utopia that does not exist, and
It
that's why
does.
no change
Make
will
it
ever happen
happen.
with this
All
kind
right,
of
let me say
attitude.
one last thing before there's a ton of money in slinging shit. Hannity owns nearly 1,000 rental properties. Alex Jones has made $1 billion. And so I don't know, you try to get money out of politics. You also got to get money out of news and information. All right, see you guys.
I'm out of here too.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Fun times as
Thank you.
always.
Good
Thank
seeing
you,
you.
guys.
Good argument.
See you later.
Mark, you can't hide back there. You got to hit the button.
I will hit the button. Gotta do this other show first.
All right. I don't know what the closing credit scene is. So yeah, you got to hit it. So I'm leaving it to you, Mark. I'm gone.